In this webinar, we will be entering the data into the plan to build a cash flow model and looking at some of the features and functionality along the way. Log in to australia.planwithvoyant.com and put /advisor go in the end to come directly to this home screen. To start a new client case from the home page, go to that plus button bottom right and you'll have a window appear with the names and the date of birth of their client. So in this one, we're going to call it Jane Demo, and she was born in 1975. It asks for her retirement age, which I'll show you where that comes into play in a second, and click Done. Now, once you're in Voyant, the first thing to do is just add any other people into the plan. So how do you do that? We're in Dashboard. Dashboard at the top here is where you add everything into your plan. Think of this as your fact-finding area. You've got the information and the dashboard is where you booked all that information in. So we're in Dashboard. What we're going to do to add in people is go to this plus button bottom right and up the top left here, people. So I'm going to add in John, her spouse, who was also born in 1975 and is also planning at the moment anyway to retire at 65. Okay, done. So what have we got in the plan already? So we've not entered anything other than the people. Let's expand using this downward arrow here to see what's in the plan. We've got Jane and John. So Jane is green and John is blue. And we've got some cash accounts, which I'll talk about in a second. Well, let's start from the bottom and work our way up. So plan settings, let's click on that. These are your assumptions used in the plan, and they set the defaults for a lot of things in the plan. So you can change them, a lot of these things at the individual item level, but these are the defaults. So when you first create a new investment account, what's that investment account growth rate going to be? It's determined by this. So I'm going to change my investment growth rate to 4.5. And I'm going to change the national average earnings, which does a number of things in the system, one of which is it increases their earnings from their income every year by this percentage by default. You can change it item level, I'll show you. I'm going to change that to 2. Now, inline help is really helpful here. If you see a word with a dotted green underline on it, you can click on that word and it will tell you where it's used in the system. If we go to fees and taxation, you can see there's 0.5% fees on all types of accounts. So that means that if I enter, say, an investment account into the plan, it's going to grow at 4.5 minus 0.5 fees, which is 4% net. I'll show you how to see that on the cash flow chart as well. There is a video in the inline help for going over these other settings here and talking about some of these things as well. So I'm going to click Done. That's the changes I'm going to make to the plan settings. The carryover assumptions. So just above plan settings, we've got carryover assumptions. These are the things that are happening prior to the start of the Voyant plan. So if there's anything to put in here that's happened before the start of Voyant, then this is where you put it. And you can select the relevant person here. And the other thing to draw your attention to on here is that there's already some cash sweep accounts set up for both Jane and John. Now, the cash sweep accounts are set up automatically by Voyant, and it uses these as a place to put money if it hasn't got instructions to send it elsewhere. So these grow by the savings defaults from your plan settings unless you change it otherwise. And that's if you see Jane's cash or John's cash when you're in year view, then that's what these are. Finally, Voyant will automatically estimate the age pension. You can see it appearing here in the dark blue. And there's a link in the description for a guide on further information on the age pension. Okay, let's go to the timeline screen. Let's move along the top bar here, click on timeline. The timeline is the framework for the plan. So the key thing here is the timings of everything are based on events. Anything happening in a particular year needs an event. And this is also a nice place to bring your client to show them their key life events over time in their plan. So if you have some events that are added automatically for you. In this case, if you remember, it asks the retirement ages of the client, and that's why these two umbrellas are positioned here at 65. The mortality defaults to age 90, but if you want, you can click and drag out, for example, if they have a family history of living longer, for example. In this case, we've got some key events that we want to add to the timeline. So there's a later life event where we're going to step down some leisure expenses as they won't be traveling as much, and they'd like to get a new kitchen. So to add an event, again, back to this plus button, bottom right, this will be a common theme today. In timeline, you have the option to add timing things. So we'll go to the event here, and we're going to call it later life. Use this slider or the drop down here to position where it is. I'm going to put it at Jane's age 75 and click done. Now the other way you can add an event is, instead of going to this plus button, double click above this bar here in the white space, and that will also pop up the new event window. So I would like a new kitchen event. I'm going to give that the house symbol. Right, we haven't actually assigned any value to these events. The cash flow chart hasn't changed. Let's go check. No changes, except we now have these tags here to show that our new events have been added. Now we've not assigned any value to how much the new kitchen is going to cost or the expenses in the plan, and we'll do that now. So let's add in the new kitchen as a goal. Goals are trackable expenses. They're the same as expenses in the cash flow chart in that they're outgoings, but they're pulled out in the system and in the report in a really nice way and shows you the progress towards the goal, if you're likely to achieve it, so on. Now it can be a one-off thing. A goal could be a one-off thing, like in here in your kitchen, or it could be, for example, sufficient income in retirement. Okay, so to add a goal, in dashboard plus button, and here you'll see everything that you're going to add into the plan. At the top, there's goals. It's a milestone goal, which means it's a one-off because it's one kitchen in 1 year. I'm going to call it new kitchen, jointly owned, $30,000. It's not a basic priority for them, it's going to be a leisure. And if I go to timing, here's the key thing. You have to select the event that we created on the timeline and set a start event. So this assigns the value to the expense and when it's going to be. So we need the event to say when. So in timing, we can use that event. And then in basics, we say how much, the name, the priority, the owners, and the inflation. Okay, let's click done. What do we expect to see on the cash flow chart, which shows money in, money out? We'd expect to see a spike, which we do. So here's the spike at that new kitchen event. If I now click and drag this new kitchen event down the plan and go back to the chart, you can see that the spike has moved along with it as well. Now you can edit it from in here. If you click on the little tag here, click on the name, it will take you to the edit window. So you can do it in here as well if you want. Okay, if you've created an event that you didn't want, in timeline, click on the name of the event and you'll see a little trash can at the top to delete it. It may be that there's events associated with some timing. You'll need to change the timing of those things before you're allowed to delete it. So I've just used this one in the goal, so I'd have to change the timing before I could delete this event. We're also going to add in a stage here. So stages really help bring this timeline to life when you're looking at it. And if I go to the plus button bottom right, I see stage. And I'm going to add in a later life stage. I'll select the age 75 event as when it starts, mortality as it finishes, and choose a colour and click done. Now you can rename these stages to whatever suits. So for example, pre-retirement could be saving, so that it triggers the client to think in the mentality of this is what we've got to be doing in those years. And in retirement, for example, could be spending. It's up to you, or you could have protection years, retirement, later life, so on. Okay, let's go back to dashboard now and start adding in our expenses. So as I say, to add anything into the plan, there's our goal there for the new kitchen. To add anything into the plan, we'll go to the plus button and go to expenses. These expenses are going to be their basics. So it's going to be for multiple years of the plan, not just a single year. So multi-year expense, jointly owned, and I'm going to call it basics. Now, they're going to have basic expenditure of $30,000 every year. It's a basic priority. It's going to inflate with that. That's the 2.5 taken as a default value from your plan settings, but you can change it if you like here for this particular expense. And the key thing is in timing, this expense is in the whole of the plan. If you wanted to, you can click on a stage or select different events. For example, if I click on savings, down here in the purple bar, the expense now will start at the start of the plan and stop at retirement. But I would like it to go through the whole of the plan. So I click on the final event at mortality, set as end event. So I'm using these events on the timeline to dictate the timing of this expense. In this case, it's for the whole of the plan. Now, a neat trick when you're adding things into the plan, if you have multiple expenses, is to go to this downward arrow here, save and add another. So now we're going to do the leisure expenses. These are $20,000. They're a leisure priority, and they're going to step down. So they are for the whole of the plan. They're planning on going on holidays for the whole of the plan, but they're going to step down at age 75. So we'll go to steps, add a step, and we're going to step these down to, in today's terms, to $10,000. But when is that step? The system doesn't know yet. Go to timing, and we need to tell it it's stepping down at the later life event. Okay. The final thing I'm going to add, save and add another, is a new car every 5 years in the plan. Let's just put the new car cost at $15,000. It's a basic. In timing, the new car is actually going to start from age 50 and go to age 80 when they think they'll sell the car and use taxis and buses and things. So what we're going to do at age 50, if I don't have an event on the timeline, I don't have to go back to timeline to do this. I can double click on the space where my mouse is now, so above the purple bar, and this will create a new event within the timing screen. And this is really handy when you don't have to go back to the timeline screen. You can just double click here to create it as you go. I'm going to give it a car symbol, and we could call this new car starts, or new cars start, I should say. Set a start event, and another double click above age 80, and give it the car symbol, new car ends. Set as end event. So there's my window, but at the moment that's going to do it every single year. Scroll down in the screen and you'll see expense frequency. So I'm going to change this to 5. Alright, that's all of our expenses added into the plan. Have a think of what you'd expect to see when I click done now. I would expect to see red, as there's no assets apart from the age pension, but red especially in the pre-retirement years, as there's nothing to meet these expenses, and some up and downs every 5 years to show the new car, which you can see here. The light blue line is the basic expenses, and it also include taxes and debts if there are any, and the black line is a leisure and luxury expenses. So this is why we've got the basic line, which shows the basic expenses we entered plus the car, which we classed as basic, and then the black line, which is the leisure holidays, which, as you see up here, steps down at age 75. Let's add in some income that they're earning in the pre-retirement years. So we'll go to the plus button, income, employment. This is Jane's earnings. Let's put some earnings in for Jane. There's that 2% that this income's going to grow at every year. When is she earning this money throughout the course of the plan? Go to timing, and I'm happy that that's going to be assumed to be for her pre-retirement years. Let's add it in for her partner. So select John in the owner. John's earnings, 60. And again, this time it's when John retires. So if I move John's retirement event, these earnings will move with that. Let's have a look at the cash flow chart. And there's the blue coming in from their earnings. And you can see it's in, there's surplus to what they actually need. So the black line is what they need, but there's more than that coming in from what they're earning. If I double click on a bar or go to year view top right, you can see in the cash flow gives you the numbers behind each year of the chart. This is a great place for you to go check if it's doing what you think it's doing. So in cash flow, there's the earnings, expenses, tax on the earnings, which Voyant calculates for you automatically, as well as those basic and leisure expenses that we entered into the plan. All right, let's now enter a savings account. So I go to the plus button, savings, and this is going to be their emergency fund. Now it has a balance of $20,000, but we don't actually want it used in the plan. So I'm going to also set the interest rate to 0 because there's nothing, they're not earning any money on this account. And since we don't want it used in the cash flow chart, even if there's shortfall, we're going to set the withdrawal limit to do not allow. You can also do a minimum balance. In this case, we're just going to ring fence that account from use in the plan. That means that even though we've added some assets in, and you'll see this differently with the investment account, there's not any use of them in the plan, even with this shortfall or red in retirement. Okay, let's go for the investments, savings and investments, investment. Jane's got some investments. They're $100,000. And she's contributing to these investments at $250 every month. When is she making these contributions? She's making these contributions. You go to timing or update timing from here. She's just going to make these in her pre-retirement years. So from now, select to start event until she retires, select as end event. Check the growth when you're in investments and pension and investments and supers. You can see the growth rate 4.5%. with a fee of 0.5%. Now, this has no withdrawal limits on it, so when there's red in the plan, it can now access this investment account to meet the shortfall, which is why you now see this light blue coming out in the retirement years. Let's now add in their supers. So plus button bottom, and in here you'll find superannuation. We'll have to add in an accumulation and retirement phase for each person. So in here, we're going to add in Jane's accumulation super. And the key thing here is this an employer linked plan? Yes, it is. So I'm going to link it to the employment that I already entered into the plan, Jane's earnings, and this will automatically start paying those guaranteed employer contributions based on the earnings in that year. So we've gone up by that 2% as well over the years. We can then see, once we've selected employer linked plan, yes, a salary sacrifice contribution option, and in here you can enter a regular salary sacrifice amount. Again, when is this salary sacrifice set up for? And it's for the pre-retirement year. So I just clicked on saving there and it just selected that whole stage for me without having to do the events. Again, check the growth, check the basics, and then save and add another. We're going to set up a retirement account for Jane. This is the money that will move into once it's in the pension phase. You can change the growth rate on the specific account if you want, and I'll show you how to transfer the money from one to another in a second. Save and add another, and we'll do the same for John. So we've got John's accumulation pension, and then we've got employer linked plan, yes. It's linked to John's earnings. It recognises that the owner's John, so it finds John's earnings as an option. It's going to pay the guaranteed employer contributions based on his earnings. He's also doing $10,000 in salary sacrifice for pre-retirement. Select John's event here, and then save and add another, and we'll do John's retirement. So John is the owner, retirement, and then done. So we now have 4 supers, 2 for each person. Let's go check, go down here. Yes, we've got green, green, blue, blue. So 2 for Jane, 2 for John. The final step is to do that transfer from one to the other. So plus button, transfers. We're going to move money from Jane's accumulation super into Jane's retirement super. All available when, and we'll do it assumed at Jane's retirement. Now you could create an event specifically for this purpose that's separate from retirement, and you could just do that either in the timeline screen or in the timing screen as I showed you before. We'll do it, save and add another, and I would like to do the same for John. John's accumulation to John's retirement. All available. When is it going to happen? Again, back to these events, drag that up to there, and then click done. What we can do now is go back to year view, and we'll drag the slider all the way along to their retirement events, which are here at 65. In the pensions tab, you can see the money moving out of the accumulation super and into the retirement one for each person. If I click on the name of the super, I can see more information, including the transfer balance used and so on. All right, the final thing we can add into the plan is a property. So plus button, property, and in here we're going to add a jointly owned family home. It's worth $600,000. And in link debts, I'm going to create and link a debt. This is the mortgage on the family home. And it's going to be a repayment amount of $1,000 every month. And this will add into our expenses for us. So click done here. There's our mortgage. When's the property owned in the plan? Okay, it's assumed from now until end of the plan, so that's fine. And if I click done, it will move these blue and black lines up in the chart because it assumes obviously that mortgage needs paid off. And so if I double click in year view now, in expenses, we'll see the mortgage on the family home payment. So the basics and the leisure did not include the mortgage repayments. The mortgage repayments are here from where I entered the debt into the plan. Let's have a look now then at this chart. So if we go to Let's See, single chart, if I hide all at the top here, what we're back to is the expense profile for the chart. So here's the expenses through the lifetime of the plan. Let's bring in some items one at a time. So in the pre-retirement years and the savings years, they have employment. Now this employment is actually surplus. By default, Voyant assumes this surplus is spent. There's ways to change that, and we're actually doing a separate webinar in this series on saving. But at the moment in this plan, it's assumed it's spent, except in the years for the new kitchen and the new cars. So what this is saying is they can afford to buy the new kitchen and the new cars each year without using their savings. However, this assumes that the expenses entered into the plan are realistic for them, and they would have, instead of spending their surplus, would have to save it to spend it on the new kitchen or the new cars. So even from year one, Voyant can be used as a tool to instigate the discussion around what are your expenses? Do you have money left over at the end of the month? This is your surplus. How does that feel? What are you currently spending money on? What would you like to spend it on? And so on. Let's bring in the other items. So we'll have a look at retirement. So we've got the age pension. We're changing the naming of this very soon. And their super. And you can see they have got sufficient assets in retirement. It doesn't quite show you the whole story. What a nice way to do it is to go to Let's See dual chart, and then you can see the assets chart as well. So you can see what's behind the chart, as it were. So you can see, okay, have they got assets left at the end of the plan, or are they just running out by the last year? In this case, I'm going to go to these three dots and a legend. The non-liquid here is their property. I'll just remove that. So we're just looking at their liquid assets. You can see, yes, they are running them down in retirement, but they do have some left at the end. Now, finally, perhaps there's some scenarios you'd like to look at. For example, you could do what if scenario where in this case, for example, it could be about retiring earlier, working part-time, taking a career break. And what you can do is create a what if scenario off of this to then be able to compare to the base plan. Okay, if you retired earlier, this is what this would look like. You'd have to save this much more money, and so on. Thank you for listening to this webinar on entering information into Voyant to build a cash flow plan. Please see other webinars on our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening.